In a forest that was once the greenest in the world, a change was happening. The leaves on the great old trees, which were usually a vibrant emerald, were now a pale, tired green. The cheerful, babbling brooks had slowed to a quiet, weary trickle, and the flowers, which once carpeted the forest floor in a riot of color, now seemed too tired to bloom. In this fading forest lived a young fawn named Pip. He was born in the spring, and he remembered a world of bright colors and happy sounds. Now, as the seasons changed, he could feel a deep and growing sadness in the woods. The air was colder than it should be, and the sunlight seemed to struggle to bring warmth to the ground. His mother and the other deer would speak in hushed, worried whispers. They said that the heart of the mountain, the great spirit that gave life to the entire forest, was growing weak. Pip, with his young and curious heart, didn't fully understand what that meant, but he could feel the sadness in the drooping leaves and the silent water. He would walk through his quiet, fading home, his big, brown eyes full of a gentle worry, wishing he could do something to bring the happy, green life back to his world. One morning, while searching for tender shoots to eat, Pip wandered into a small, hidden meadow he had never seen before. This little meadow was different from the rest of the fading forest. It was protected by a circle of ancient, mossy standing stones, and inside, a single patch of grass remained a vibrant, healthy green. And in the very center of that patch, growing all by itself, was a single, perfect flower. It was a spring blossom, a flower of immense and gentle magic, and it was the last one blooming in the entire forest. Its 6 petals were a beautiful, creamy white, and from its golden center, it emitted a soft, warm, and constant light. The air around it felt warm and full of life, a tiny island of hope in a sea of encroaching sadness. Pip had heard stories from his mother about these flowers, that they held the last of the springtime's warmth and the memory of the mountain's happy heart. He approached it slowly, his steps reverent, and he lowered his head to feel its gentle warmth on his nose. It felt like a tiny, sleeping sunbeam. As he stood there, a whisper of an idea, a feeling more than a thought, seemed to drift into his mind from the flower itself. It was a feeling of purpose, a silent plea for help. Pip knew, with a certainty that filled his entire little body, what he had to do. The flower held the last of the forest's warmth, and the mountain's heart had grown cold. He had to take the warmth to the heart. He had to carry the spring blossom all the way to the very top of the mountain. It was a long and scary journey for such a little fawn. The paths were steep, and the high places were home to cold winds and shadows. But the thought of his beautiful forest fading into a grey, sad sleep was much scarier. He had to be brave. With the utmost care, he gently took the stem of the spring blossom in his mouth. He was careful not to crush it, holding it just tightly enough. The flower's petals rested gently against his cheek, and its warm, golden light was a comforting presence. He took one last look at the little green meadow, a silent thank you passing between him and the ancient stones that had protected this last piece of magic. Then, with a new and determined spring in his step, he left the meadow and began his journey. He did not know the way, but he trusted that the flower's warmth would guide him, a tiny, golden compass pointing him towards the cold, sleeping heart of the mountain. The first great obstacle on Pip's journey was the river. Down in the valley, it had been a slow, sad trickle, but up here, closer to its source, it was a wide and powerful current. However, it was not a healthy river. The water was a murky, and it flowed not with energy, but with a heavy, sluggish weariness. Great mossy rocks were slick with a sad, grey slime, and the water seemed to groan as it pushed its way through the narrow channel. There was no bridge for a little fawn to cross. Pip stood at the bank, his heart sinking a little. The water looked cold and unwelcoming. But then he looked at the glowing blossom he carried. Its warm, golden light reflected on the murky surface of the water. He took a deep breath, gathered his courage, and carefully stepped into the cold current. As he waded deeper, the water swirling around his wobbly legs, he felt the flower's warmth spreading out from him, a tiny, comforting aura in the cold river. The sluggish, sad river spirit, a form of murky, slow-moving water, seemed to notice. The current around him seemed to part just a little, making his passage a tiny bit easier. It was as if the river, recognizing the warmth of a happier time, was helping him on his quest to restore it. The path grew steeper and more difficult. It led him to a place where the forest was sickest. Here, the trees were bare and skeletal, and the ground was covered not in soft moss, but in a thick, tangled wall of thorny, grey briar bushes. The thorns were long and sharp, and they blocked the path completely. There seemed to be no way through. This was a place where the mountain's heart had grown so cold that only sad and angry things could grow. Pip stood before the thorny wall, his little heart trembling with fear. The thorns looked like 100 sharp teeth, waiting to snag his soft fur. He wanted to turn back, but then he felt the steady, gentle warmth of the blossom against his cheek. It reminded him of his promise. He knew he had to keep going. He lowered his head, closed his eyes, and very, very slowly, he began to push his way into the thicket. He moved with incredible care, turning his body to avoid the sharpest thorns and stepping as lightly as he could. The golden light of the flower shone into the tangled grey mess, and a strange thing began to happen. The thorny branches that were touched by the flower's warm light seemed to soften just a little, bending away from him ever so slightly, as if the memory of springtime sunshine was making them less angry. The journey through the thorns was long and difficult, and by the time Pip emerged on the other side, he was very tired, and his soft fur was snagged in a few places, but he had made it through. He now stood on the high, rocky slopes of the mountain, above the last of the trees. The air was thin and cold, and the peak was now very close. He looked back down the way he had come. From up here, he could see the entire forest spread out below him, and he saw something that made his tired heart soar with hope. The path he had taken was no longer just a faint trail. A thin, gentle, winding line of vibrant, healthy green was now visible, tracing his exact route. The warmth of the spring blossom he carried had left a trail of life behind him. The river, where he had crossed, now had a single, clear, sparkling current running through its murky water. The pine forest, where the birds had been silent, now had a patch of bright, healthy green, and even the thorny briar patch now had a single, gentle, green path winding through it. His small journey was already beginning to heal the great forest. The sight filled him with a renewed strength and purpose. The heart of the mountain was close, and he knew now, more than ever, that he had the power to wake it up. After safely crossing the river, the path began to climb steeply into a forest of ancient, towering pine trees. The air here was very still and very quiet. This part of the forest should have been filled with the cheerful, chattering songs of the mountain birds, but today the branches were silent. Pip looked up and saw them, perched unhappily in the high branches. They were fluffed up against the unusual cold, their usually bright feathers looking dull and their beaks tucked low. They did not sing, The mountain's sadness had stolen their music, leaving them as quiet and as grey as the misty air around them. As Pip walked beneath their branches, the warm, golden light from the spring blossom he carried shone upwards, casting a gentle, sunny glow on the branches above. A few of the birds looked down, their little heads tilting with curiosity. A single, brave chickadee, seeing the light, let out a tiny, hopeful, questioning chirp. It was not a full song, but it was the first note of music the high forest had heard in a very long time. Pip looked up at the little bird and gave a gentle nod of encouragement, as if to say, "Don't worry, I'm bringing the warmth back," he continued, his climb leaving a tiny spark of hope behind him in the silent, waiting trees. Pip found what he was looking for. In the center of the mountain's great stone chest, there was a small hollow, a depression in the rock that was shaped exactly like a heart. And inside this hollow was a patch of the driest, saddest looking moss he had ever seen. It was brown and withered and felt cold and brittle to the touch. This was the heart of the mountain, and it was dying. This was the source of all the forest's sadness. Pip knew what he had to do. This was the end of his journey, the final and most important step. He leaned forward and, with the utmost gentleness and care, he placed the single, beautiful, glowing spring blossom right in the very center of the heart-shaped hollow, its warm petals resting on the cold, dead moss. He then took a step back, his own little heart pounding in his chest. He had brought the last of the springtime's warmth to the coldest, saddest place in his world. He had done all he could. Now, all he could do was wait and hope that his small gift of love would be enough to wake the giant from its long and lonely sleep. Pip finally reached the very top of the mountain. The peak was a wide, flat, and windswept expanse of bare rock. It was cold and silent here, with only the mournful whistle of the wind for company. As he looked around, he began to see it. The very rocks of the peak were not just random stones. They were shaped into a form. It was a face, a vast and ancient face, lying on its side as if in a deep sleep. A great, rocky cliff formed a noble brow. Two huge, snow-filled hollows were closed eyes, and a long, weathered ridge of stone was a silent, unmoving mouth. This was the face of the moss-hearted mountain, the gentle, sleeping earth giant. But there was no life here. The rock was a cold, hard, lifeless grey. The patches of moss that should have been a vibrant, living green were now brown and dry, like old, dead grass. The heart of the mountain was not just sleeping. It felt as if it had turned to stone. Pip felt a great wave of sadness for this immense, lonely creature. He walked slowly and reverently across the stony face, his little hooves making soft clicking sounds, until he reached the place right over the giant's silent, stony heart. For a long, silent moment, nothing happened. The wind whistled its lonely tune, and the flowers' golden light seemed very small in the vast, grey emptiness of the mountain peak. Pip's heart began to sink with fear. Had he failed? Was he too late? But then he saw it. The dry, brown moss directly beneath the glowing blossom began to change. A single, tiny speck of vibrant, living green appeared. Then another and another. A slow, beautiful wave of green began to spread outwards from the flower, as if the moss were drinking in its warmth and coming back to life. And then he felt it. A deep, slow, and powerful vibration that rose up from the rock beneath his feet. Thump thump. It was a heartbeat. The great stone heart of the mountain was beginning to beat again. The sound was low and rumbling at first, but it grew stronger and more steady with every beat, a powerful rhythm of life returning. The little flower had done it. Its small, pure warmth had been enough to rekindle the ancient, sleeping heart of the great Earth's giant. The beautiful, life-giving green of the moss did not stop at the edge of the heart-shaped hollow. It continued to spread, a magical wave of vibrant color flowing out across the entire mountaintop. It washed over the great stone face, turning the cold, grey rock into a soft, living blanket of the most beautiful green imaginable. The mountain was no longer a lifeless statue of stone, it was alive. The deep, rumbling heartbeat grew stronger, and with it came a new sound, the sound of a long, slow, and deeply contented sigh. It was the sound of the mountain taking its first waking breath in 100 years. The wind, which had been so cold and mournful, was caught up in this great sigh, and it was transformed. It became a warm, gentle, and happy breeze that swirled around Pip, feeling like a grateful, loving hug. The sleeping, stone face on the mountain softened, and the hard, rocky lines of sadness were replaced by the gentle, peaceful, and deeply serene expression of a happy, sleeping giant. The mountain was not fully awake, but it was no longer lost in a cold, sad sleep. It was now in a warm, peaceful, and happy slumber, its heart beating strong and its breath a warm and gentle wind. The wave of life and warmth did not stop at the peak. It flowed down the mountainside, a great, invisible river of magical energy. It washed over the thorny briar patch, and the grey, angry thorns retracted, replaced by soft, green leaves and beautiful, sweet-smelling white flowers. It swept through the silent pine forest, and the tired, pale needles instantly turned a deep and healthy green, and the birds, feeling the warmth and the happiness, all burst into a magnificent, joyful chorus. The wave of life reached the sluggish, grey river, and the water was instantly cleansed, becoming clear, sparkling, and full of a happy, bubbling energy as it rushed towards the sea. The magic finally reached the valley floor, and the drooping flowers lifted their heads, the grass turned a vibrant emerald, and the leaves on the trees shimmered with a new, healthy life. The entire world was reborn, washed clean of its sadness, and filled with a new, powerful, and joyful life force. The forest was no longer fading. It was more alive and more beautiful than it had ever been before. And it was all thanks to the courage of one very small fawn who had been brave enough to carry the last of the spring's warmth to the place that needed it most. Image prompt. With his heart overflowing with a joy too big for his little body, Pip knew it was time to go home. He gave the great, green, sleeping face of the mountain one last, loving look, and then began his journey down. The path was no longer steep or scary. It was a soft, green, mossy trail, and the birds sang to him as he went. When he reached the place where the thorns had been, he found a beautiful archway of sweet-smelling flowers to walk through. When he reached the river, the water was clear and cheerful, and the river spirit, now a happy, laughing girl made of light, created a bridge of smooth, shining stones for him to cross. The whole world seemed to be thanking him, helping him on his way. He trotted happily, his little legs no longer tired, but full of a happy, bounding energy. He was no longer just a small fawn. He was Pip, the hero who had woken the mountain, the brave little friend who had brought the springtime back to the forest. He couldn't wait to see his mother and to tell her all about his incredible, wonderful adventure. When Pip arrived back in the meadows of his home, his mother and the other deer were waiting for him. They had seen the wave of life and color sweep down from the mountain, and they had felt the return of the forest's happy heartbeat. They knew that somehow her brave little son had been the cause of it all. His mother ran to him and nuzzled him with a love and a pride that was bigger than the whole mountain. "Oh, Pip," she whispered, her voice full of emotion. "You brave, wonderful child, you saved us. You saved our home." The other deer gathered round, their gentle, dark eyes full of a deep respect and admiration. Pip, who had always been just a quiet little fawn, was now their hero. He did not feel proud in a boastful way. He just felt deep, quiet happiness. He had not used great strength or powerful magic. He had simply used the kindness in his own small heart, and it had been enough to heal the whole world. He nuzzled back into his mother's warm, soft fur, feeling tired, but incredibly happy, finally and truly home. That night, as Pip lay curled up beside his mother under the gentle light of the moon, the forest was more peaceful than he had ever known it to be. A new sound filled the air. It was not the sad, lonely hum of before. It was a deep, gentle, and steady sound, like a giant, contented purr. It was the sound of the moss-hearted mountain, sleeping happily, its heart beating strong and its dreams full of warmth and life. The sound was a comforting, loving presence, a lullaby for the entire forest, a promise that all was well. The little spring blossom, its work now done, had become a permanent part of the mountain's heart, a tiny golden star of warmth that would keep it happy for 1,000 years to come. Pip closed his big, brown eyes, feeling the gentle, purring hum of the mountain vibrate through the ground and into his own sleepy body. He was safe, his home was safe, and he knew that he would spend the rest of his days living in the most beautiful, most magical and happiest forest in the whole wide the world. And with that peaceful thought, he drifted off into a deep and well-deserved sleep. And so, the little fawn and the great mountain filled the world with a new and happy song. Now it is your turn to find the quiet peace of the forest in your own dreams. Close your eyes, listen to the steady rhythm of your own heart, and sleep. Well, if you enjoyed our fable tonight, we hope you'll join us again. Please like and subscribe to Bedtimes Fable to help us share more gentle stories with the world. Sweet dreams.